The true identity of Brutus is one of the biggest and least talked about plot holes in the entire Call of Duty Zombies storyline, and today I'm going to explain how this one detail changes everything. At this point in the Call of Duty franchise, Brutus or the Warden is truly an icon, featuring in multiple maps, game modes and even character bundles across an array of games. Yet the vast majority of the community do not know his true identity, and the controversy surrounding his backstory within the Ether storyline, leading to one of the biggest plot holes and simultaneously unnoticed retcons in the entire history of the series, and I aim to change that. But first, we're going to need some context. Mob of the Dead. Considered by many to be the pinnacle of the Call of Duty Zombies experience and the standard to which all future maps will be held. But what makes it such a fan favourite? To understand this, we must first look back at the state of the Call of Duty Zombies community prior to the map's release. Coming off the back of the monumental finale that was the Moon Easter egg, Treyarch had the seemingly insurmountable task of living up to the community's expectations for a follow-up map that they would surely have to deliver upon. And then we got Transit. Now I know what you're thinking. Another video hating on Transit, how original, so I'll keep it short. It's no secret at this point that Treyarch initially had a much grander vision for what Transit was supposed to be. Regardless, this vision isn't what we received, much to the dismay of the community. Despite an initial positive reaction to the map, mainly due to it being new and within its honeymoon period, fans quickly came to see its many shortcomings and community sentiment quickly turned from that of positivity to overwhelming disappointment and frustration, leaving the community with little choice but to eagerly await the release of the first DLC for the game, and I think we all know where this is going. Die Rise, another map which the community loves to berate and one that the vast majority despised upon release and many still do to this day. I won't go in depth on the many problems with this map as they serve no real importance to the subject of today's video. However, after two seemingly lackluster and borderline disappointing maps releasing back to back, the Zombies community was on its knees and in dire need of a new and truly innovative map to correct the downward spiral that Black Ops 2 appeared to be on since launch. Fans' prayers were finally answered with the release of Black Ops 2's second DLC Uprising and the Zombies map Mob of the Dead. Now I could talk about Mob of the Dead's gameplay and story all day long, and I'm sure I will in a future video. However, for this video we need to focus on one key addition, the first mid-round mini-boss, Brutus. Brutus is a special enemy type who takes the form of a much larger zombie in a prison guard uniform, decorated in hellish barbed wire and riot gear, adding to his already imposing stature. Despite their significance to the mode, it's not Brutus' gameplay dynamics which we're here to discuss. It's his story. So let's take it back to the start.
Hey Sal, we must have been through this 50 times already.
And we'll go through it another 50 if that's what it takes. 9:30, lights out. God begins his rounds.
We can see from the intro cinematic that our playable characters are four mobsters: Albert the Weasel Arlington, Salvatore De Luca, Billy Hanson and Michael Finn O'Leary. The four are imprisoned in the notorious Alcatraz Island Federal Penitentiary and have devised a cunning plan to escape that first involves luring an unsuspecting prison guard, Stanley Ferguson, into the Weasel's cell and murdering him to secure the keys to free the other mobsters. However, moments after their successful escape, a seemingly injured Ferguson staggers out of the Weasel's cell, much to the frustration of the other mobsters, who immediately begin insulting Arlington when they're interrupted by the iconic zombie scream and the reveal that Ferguson has in fact become a zombie.
Boys in the laundry stashed the parts.
Of course they fucking did.
What the fuck? I killed him.
You've been in the joint too long, Al. You've forgotten how to get shit done.
The mobsters then begin to notice the environment around them changing before being overwhelmed by hordes of the undead, leading to them all being killed one by one. The gameplay then begins with the player in a ghost-like form known as Afterlife. As we progress through the map and piece the story together, we learn that the characters are stuck in a cycle in which they fight endless waves of the undead, ultimately culminating in three of the mobsters deciding the only way to escape is to kill the Weasel. It is eventually revealed, however, that the only way the cycle can be broken is when Arlington finally manages to kill the other three mobsters. Now how does this tie into Brutus, I hear you ask? Well, as we know, our characters are stuck in a cycle. However, they're not the only ones. Stanley Ferguson, the guard, is also trapped within the same cycle in the form of Brutus. We know that Stanley is Brutus due to multiple character quotes from the mobsters and from Brutus himself confirming this.
Look out, guys! It's the guard!
Why did you kill me? I was always nice to you. Thought I was an easy target. I had a life, a wife and son. 9:30, guard begins his rounds. This better be the real deal this time. four were in cahoots.
You hear some of the shit that thing's saying? I think it's Ferguson.
These quotes clearly indicate that Brutus and Stanley Ferguson are one and the same. So there we have it. Brutus and Stanley Ferguson. Seems simple enough. No major inconsistencies or plot holes here. Wait, what? Brutus isn't Ferguson. He's the Warden. How? Blood of the what? Our blood? Mine blood? You cannot possibly expect me to let this happen.
You son of a bitch!
Let me guess. You're not gonna let us in on what that was about.
Like most things in the COD Zombie storyline, it's not quite that simple. Yes, in Mob of the Dead, Brutus's identity is and always was intended to be that of Stanley Ferguson, the Guard. And you may have noticed that the story of Mob of the Dead is seemingly entirely disconnected from that of the main storyline. That is no mistake. Upon initial release, Mob of the Dead was never truly intended to play a role in the larger narrative, let alone a role as significant as it ended up having. Other than a few throwaway references and quotes from the Weasel here and there really was no concrete connection between Mob of the Dead and the rest of the Ether storyline. However, this all changed when Jimmy Zielinski, the studio head for Zombies from World at War all the way through to the first half of Black Ops 2, was replaced by Jason Blundell. You see, one of the main reasons for Mob of the Dead's seemingly fresh approach to zombies was because it was in fact developed by an entirely different team to all prior maps, being made under the leadership of Jason Blundell, the man who would supersede Jimmy for the final map in Black Ops 2, Origins, along with the entirety of Black Ops 3 and 4. With this change in leadership came a change in narrative focus. Jimmy Zielinski had intended on ending the COD Zombie storyline with Buried, his final map, in which the culmination of the Easter eggs from Transit, Die Rise and Buried would lead to you receiving one of two possible endings, one in which Richtofen succeeds, and the other in which Maxis succeeds. Jason, on the other hand, felt there was much more story to be explored within this universe, and would seek to expand upon the lore in upcoming games and maps, starting with his second map, Origins. In the aim of keeping this video relatively concise, I'll gloss over the vast majority of this. All we need to know is that we'll be following a multiversal version of our original four characters: Tank Dempsey, Nikolai Belinsky, Takeo Masaki, and of course, Dr. Edward Richtofen. This version of the crew is known as Primus, and they're on a mission to put an end to the chaos that's been brought upon the world by their former selves and the influences of Element 115. Now, for the most part, the change in leadership and narrative direction was received positively by the community, and Blundell was praised for his intricate storytelling and how it was seamlessly integrated into the gameplay. However, not all fans were welcoming of this change, as many preferred the original and straightforward gameplay loop that they had become accustomed to under Jimmy Zielinski. The topic of whose gameplay and narrative leadership is superior is one far too in-depth for this video, and one which I will gladly divulge into in a standalone video. However, for now, let's return to the topic at hand. In the expanded storyline, we learn that Richtofen had a lab constructed on Alcatraz Island with the assistance of the Illuminati and the Warden of Alcatraz. Now here is where the wider Ether storyline and the story of Mob of the Dead converge. When the Easter egg for Mob of the Dead is complete, you have two options, as alluded to earlier on. One in which the cycle continues, and one in which the cycle is broken. We know that in the wider and expanded Ether storyline, all of our characters are also stuck within a cycle. This cycle is different, yet intrinsically linked to that of the Mob of the Dead cycle, in such a way that when the Mob of the Dead cycle is broken, so too is the larger Ether storyline cycle. In the Unbroken cycle, the Primus crew visit Alcatraz Island to collect blood vials from another version of Richtofen. The whole exchange takes place in a matter of seconds and is shown in the Call of Duty Zombies comic book. However, in the Broken cycle, things play out a little differently. Rather than teleporting directly into Richtofen's lab, our crew is teleported somewhere else within the prison. Due to arriving in the wrong location, our crew are late for collecting the blood vials and ultimately end up getting trapped on the island. This is where we enter Blood of the Dead.
Was stumbling around in total darkness part of plan?
You give us the fire, we'll give them hell.
Do not speak so lightly of hell.
Easy, Tech. I didn't mean the real thing.
Gentlemen, we are here.
Where have you taken us?
They should be closer to the lab. No matter.
As we play through Blood of the Dead, we learn that our characters becoming trapped on the island was no mere coincidence, and that it was all in fact part of the Shadow Man's carefully crafted plan to ensnare Richtofen and utilise his blood to free himself and the Apothecans from the Dark Ether. Richtofen becomes aware of this fact due to having read it in the Chronorium. For those unaware, think of the Chronorium as a book which tells your entire future. The Chronorium also reveals to Richtofen that the only way forward is to drain his blood and use it to open a portal to escape the island, killing him in the process. Valuing his own life, Richtofen does everything in his power to subvert this outcome and change his fate. However, in doing so, he's inadvertently playing directly into the Shadow Man's plan. This is revealed to us when Brutus attacks our characters and imprisons them on behalf of the Shadow Man. You see, in this map, we discover that Brutus's true identity is that of the prison warden of Alcatraz, the very same warden who helped Richtofen build his lab on the island in the first place. But wait, we know this can't be true, as in Mob of the Dead we learn that Brutus is Stanley Ferguson, the guard. Unless, of course, Stanley's not just a prison guard as we first thought, but rather the prison warden himself, and that the mobsters just incorrectly assumed his rank. Seems plausible enough. No major discrepancy, just a slight error on the mobster's part. As simple as it would be, unfortunately this is not the case. Stanley Ferguson and the Warden of Alcatraz are in fact two completely separate characters. We know this to be true thanks to a series of radios hidden throughout Blood of the Dead. In these radios we learn of the Warden's own backstory and how he's manipulated and eventually driven insane by the Shadow Man.
No! Contraption!
Hear me.
Yes, I can hear you. Apologies, my lord. I am here.
Calm, faithful warden, calm. I bring glad news. The world that you seek is near at hand.
Oh, thank you, my lord. Thank you. I've done my best to prepare the way. Please, where are you now?
Hidden. Trapped. Waiting.
I see. Tell me what I must do.
4 souls in your possession, 4 arriving soon. With the first, you will transform the island.
My lord, I entreat thee to speak. I have done as you asked. The remaining 3 of the first 4 shall die by electric chair this evening, and soon after I shall join them. It will be glorious in this new realm, Lord, I have no doubt, but I confess, I am afraid. This form is weak and has taken to drink, but I do cling to it still. Please, grant me the strength to...
Grant you the strength? Oh, you poor, pathetic wretch. I will grant you nothing until your death. You know this.
Yes, my lord, of course. My life is part of the disease, and the disease must be purged. I rejoice that day has come.
But you are a base, disgusting creature that cannot help fearing for its own skin. It is not your fault.
Oh, thank you for saying so, my lord. Truth be told, I long for the miracle that will release me.
That's a good lad. You have been an adequate servant. Therefore you will continue to serve after the corruption.
The Shadow Man convinces the Warden to act as his servant, and in return he'll offer him immense power in the afterlife. This power of course being his transformation into Brutus, not Stanley Ferguson's. Within some of these radios, we even hear literal conversations between Stanley Ferguson and the Warden, confirming outright that they're in fact separate characters and they're in no possible way the same person.
A trap for another. Forgive my ignorance, Lord, but how will I know what to do?
Sir, it's me, Stanley. We have a situation.
Damn the situation, Ferguson. You handle it. I am not to be disturbed.
Wait. Listen.
I'm real sorry to interrupt your prayers, sir, but there's been a murder up on the roof. It's Al Arlington.
Arlington?
Yes, sir. Part of some kind of botched escape attempt.
Brutus and the Warden being one and the same is also further hammered home by multiple quotes from Richtofen, who out and out identifies him as the Warden.
The voices of the damned and the doomed can get in line behind you 3, the Warden, the Keepers, and the numerous other Richtofens now placing demands on my time. Any attempt to bargain with the Warden would not go well for you. The Warden has no interest in killing us. Power restored! And I know how much you hate power, Herr Warden, but don't even think about knocking it out again. Never mind the power, or that fool Warden. The entrance is just ahead. The Warden. I have known him to take many forms, each one used to torture the souls of both the damned and the doomed. He's not very nice.
The final nail in the coffin for the true identity of Brutus comes in the form of the official Call of Duty Zombies timeline, wherein we are told that on January 19th, the Warden commits suicide by electric chair, teleporting his soul to the Alcatraz pocket dimension, thus becoming Brutus. The timeline also tells us that on October 1st, 1941, Stanley Ferguson retires from employment at Alcatraz. These excerpts prove in no uncertain terms that the Warden is Brutus, and that Stanley Ferguson and the Warden are separate characters. So what does this mean in regards to all the evidence we discussed prior regarding Brutus and Stanley Ferguson being the same person? Well, herein lies the exact topic of this video. This all boils down to one thing: a continuity error. This continuity error has some rather large storyline implications, as is to be expected when you suddenly and without explanation change the identity of a character. As if Stanley is Brutus, then his actions in Blood of the Dead make no logical sense, as there's no reason at all for him to capture Richtofen and carry out the will of the Shadow Man. This plotline only makes sense for the Warden. Similarly, if we take Brutus to be the Warden, many of his quotes, actions and reasons for attacking our characters in Mob of the Dead make no sense, as the Warden has no personal connection to any of these characters, and therefore there is no narrative reason for him to torment them throughout the map. However, for Stanley Ferguson, the reason is clear, seeing as they're the very reason he's become stuck in the hellish purgatory that has become of Alcatraz Island, and because they quite literally killed him in cold blood. So why the sudden character change that caused this mess of a plot hole in the first place? Well, you see, as mentioned earlier, Mob of the Dead, and by extension Brutus, were never intended to play the role in the storyline that they would later inherit, and the reasoning for the change was simply to tie in a fan favourite map to the wider narrative and give it some major significance towards the end of the story. And as a result, certain details had to be amended to allow this to happen, and Brutus is one of the countless examples of this. What most people seem to forget when looking at the Ether storyline in retrospect is that the story was never intended to exist, let alone become the behemoth that it would later evolve into, and that the developers were for the most part just making up as they went along. This is far more evident in older games like World at War, where as the game's lifecycle went on, fan speculation and theories eventually led to the developers adding small hints and Easter eggs alluding to a grander story, with the overall narrative vision slowly being constructed as time went on. However, small details such as the identity of Brutus, the very first and seemingly narratively insignificant mini-boss, is just one of these small details which were retconned and later adapted to be better suited to the overarching story. So to finalise, yes, Brutus' true identity in the current version of the Call of Duty Zombies storyline is that of the Warden of Alcatraz. However, this wasn't always the case, and Brutus was in fact originally supposed to be Stanley Ferguson, and if you look at the story of Mob of the Dead in a vacuum, as was the original intent, he still is. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed watching this video just as much as I did making it. I know I glossed over a significant amount of storyline details in this video, and if there are any points you think I missed that relate to this topic, please let me know in the comment section below. Or if you have any other topics in mind, please leave a comment as well and I'll be sure to address them in a future video. Thanks again, and take it easy.